So today we're jumping right into a really big topic, homeopathy. You know, it's a practice used by millions of people, yet it is absolutely surrounded by controversy. Our goal here is to try and cut through some of that noise by breaking down 10 of the most common myths, all based on material from a homeopathic practitioner.
Okay, let's kick things off with a number that, well, it might just surprise you. 200 million. That's how many people use homeopathy regularly all around the globe. That is a massive user base, for sure.
And that, of course, begs a really interesting question. Why all the controversy? To explore that, we're going to dive into the work to really unpack his counter-arguments to 10 very common myths about the practice.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll start with a quick intro, just to get on the same page. Then we'll tackle two of the biggest critiques, the ones about science and speed. After that, we'll look at the medicine itself, the little white pills. Then we'll move on to treatment rules, and we'll finish up with that really fascinating myth about side effects.
First up, homeopathy, a quick intro. Before we can even start tackling the myths, we've got to have a solid working definition of what we're actually talking about here. So at its heart, it's this 200-year-old system, and its main focus is on treating a patient's specific symptoms. For example, you could have two people, both with the flu, right? But they might get totally different homeopathic remedies. Why? Because maybe one has a runny nose and a killer headache, while the other's dealing with a cough and body aches. It's all about individualization.
Okay, section 2. This is where we tackle the biggest critiques, science and speed. If you've heard anything about homeopathy, chances are you've heard these two arguments. So let's see.
First up is the big one, the claim you've almost certainly heard before, that homeopathy is an unproven science, with no real proof that it's anything more than just a placebo. Think about it. You can't actually see the current in a wire, right? You only see its effect when the light turns on. His homeopathy is similar, and he points to a huge body of research and a unique kind of human trial called provings as evidence of those effects.
All right, the second major critique is all about speed. There's this common belief that homeopathic treatment is this really long, drawn-out process that just takes ages to show any results. Now, the answer to this really lies in understanding the natural course of a disease. Acute illnesses like the flu, they hit you fast and they leave you fast. But chronic conditions, like a skin issue, that can take years to develop in the first place.
And this is where the context becomes absolutely crucial. Many patients turn to homeopathy as a last resort for these chronic conditions that are already really advanced. So the treatment timeline isn't slow because the medicine is weak. No, it's slow because it has to match the natural, slow pace of the disease it's trying to treat.
All right, let's move on to the medicine itself. We've all seen them, the little white pills. But what exactly are they? This section is all about tackling the myths surrounding the physical remedies themselves.
So here we'll address three pretty common questions about the pills. Are they all the same? Do they have steroids in them? And are they safe for people with diabetes? This is where a lot of confusion seems to be.
The pills themselves, they aren't the medicine. They're just carriers for one of over 4,000 different liquid remedies. As for steroids, well, while some of the source materials are hormonal, they go through a special process designed to stimulate the body's own systems. And for diabetics, the pills have these tiny amounts of lactose, which is a complex sugar. In that special process we just mentioned, it actually has a name, potentization. And this is absolutely central to how homeopathy works. It's a method of repeated dilution and shaking that is said to remove a substance's toxic qualities while activating its therapeutic properties.
Okay, so we've covered the science and the pills. But what's it actually like to use homeopathy? Section 4 looks at the myths around the rules of treatment and how it's applied in practice.
There's a common myth that the treatment involves all these super strict rules. But the argument here is that diet restrictions aren't for the remedy, they're for the disease itself. Like cutting salt for high blood pressure. And this is crucial. It's completely safe to use homeopathy right alongside conventional medicine. And that suddenly stopping a prescription can actually be pretty dangerous.
So what about modern science? Well, far from being ignored, lab tests and scans are seen as vital for diagnosis and for managing a case. But here's the key distinction. Those tests are used to understand the disease, while the actual homeopathic remedy is chosen based on the patient's unique individual symptoms.
And that brings us to our fifth and final section, which tackles what is maybe the most appealing and misunderstood claim about homeopathy, the idea of having no side effects.
You've probably heard this one. But, and this is a big but, it comes with a very important distinction that really changes everything.
And here is that critical distinction. In a sick person, a correct remedy has no side effects because the body just puts it to work healing. But, and this is the fascinating part, if a healthy person repeatedly takes that same remedy, it will actually start to create symptoms.
And this isn't just some hypothetical. This phenomenon is actually the basis for how remedies are researched in a process they call drug proving. Healthy volunteers intentionally take a substance and document every single symptom that appears, creating a complete profile for that remedy. And this leads us to the fundamental principle of the entire system. The so-called side effects that a substance causes in a healthy person are the very same symptoms it is used to cure in a sick person.
Which leaves us with this final central question. Can a substance truly cure the same symptoms it causes? That idea, often summarized as like cures like, is the bedrock of homeopathy. And that's the thought we'll leave you with today. Thanks for joining us